Let's get your home loan rate down. We understand how important managing cash flow is for investors. That's why talking to one of our brokers can help you find the best loan options and a better rate. Your Finny loan expert will assess your loan and quickly spot a better option if it's out there. With access to over 70 lenders and a wide range of products, you're sure to get the lowest available rate in the market. Stop worrying about your repayments now and take charge of your financial freedom. Contact a Finny mortgage specialist today on 02 8866 2444 or visit our website at www.finny.com.au.
This is a Momentum Media production.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show, the podcast by investors for investors.
Okay, how you going? It's Phil Tarrant here, the host of the Smart Property Investment Show. Hope you're enjoying what looks like it's going to be a hot and long summer. Wherever you're tuning into this, maybe binging on the Smart Property Investment Show over the Christmas break, which I know a lot of people do. It's funny, I get a lot of people, they find this podcast and go, Phil, I wish I found it years ago. I've just listened to 200 episodes in a row. And I say, really? Have you really listened to 200 episodes in a row? And I normally apologize because they've been listening to me sort of bang on about stuff. But I get great satisfaction in the fact that people like tuning into it and enjoy it and they use it for decision making. I'm a big advocate of not making decisions in isolation. My decision-making process, which may frustrate some people, but I like to think it's probably well considered, is that I orientate myself with something. I get all the information I can around it to allow me to have an informed decision or opinion on it. I normally look for the views of other people in relation to it, which helps me formulate my opinion or orientate myself with it, and then I will make a decision around it. That's typically how I go about doing stuff, and it's worked pretty well with me over the years. A very consultative and collaborative approach where in data or research speak, I'd be pulling in quantitative and qualitative information with a view towards orientating myself towards a particular issue or problem, and then pulling the trigger and being decisive in my decision making is pretty important. But a big part of this essentially is making sure you're getting the right information. So in many ways, and for those people that know me pretty well, I'm a bit of a data nerd. I like data. I like research. Research being a foundational mechanism for decision making. A lot of people, particularly in property investment, overlook data and they overlook the information, which is the nuts and bolts, and they lean more towards, inverted commas, gut instinct in their decision making. And typically they're the people that don't make the good investments. So the best investors I know are able to have a healthy marriage between the two. That is the data and being able to interpret that data, but then also viewing it through a real world environment. So this is the ground truth, getting on the ground, looking at locations, understanding what's going on and being familiar with everything. Someone I turn to when it comes to property related data. Fortunately, there's some good operators out there like your big real estate platforms like realestate.com.au that provide a lot of information and other demographic or research companies. But there's some buyers agents out there doing some pretty smart stuff with data. One of them in particular is hung his hat around it, and he claims to be Australia's biggest property data nerd, Arjun Paliwal, who's the founder and director at InvestorKit. So I like getting him on the show to talk through data. Any chance I get to talk through data and what it means and how to use data, primarily, that's my big thing. Okay, data is only as good as how you choose to action or take action from it. Arjun's a bloke I normally get on to have a yarn with me. So I pulled him in today because he's been working, believe it or not, Arjun's been working on something to do with data. Who would have thought? Arjun, how you going?
I'm good, my friend. And yeah, that rabbit hole keeps getting deeper, and we're definitely into the data space. And in this particular case, it was a very unique project, which I found pretty exciting.
Yeah. So, and I would note that you, for your clients or potential clients, Arjun and his crew invest a lot of time, energy, and effort and money into data. And this is originating their own data, but then also acquiring data from myriad sources and then putting him in his own little special black box that he shakes up and gets all his findings out of it. So they put a lot of dough in the data, these guys. And when I see people like Arjun and his firm at InvestorKit of investing in additional research to support better decision making. That gets a thumbs up from me. You can go and find this report now. It's on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Just go to the website. You'll see some banners and some other areas where you can download this. It's called the 2023 Buying with Confidence Survey. This is a body of work that Arjun and InvestorKit did in conjunction with a market intelligence business called Agile Market Intelligence, which is a third-party provider of data and insights around property and mortgages. They've joined forces to come up with a unique insight around this. And it gets a thumbs up from me because it's all about buyer's agents and why people should be using buyer's agents. But this report highlights that investors who choose to engage buyer's agents tend to experience a high degree of buying success. This is the headline numbers, including enhanced ease of use, superior performance outcomes, and a heightened level of satisfaction with their property purchases. So in lockstep with the team over at Agile Market Intelligence, Arjun, you guys got together and said, let's actually go and get some insights from property investors around like real world insights, like numbers around how good is their experience working with buyer's agents and why use a buyer's agent? Because people normally talk about this with a narrative around, oh, you get this, that, and the other. You've gone away and found out some numbers and got some baseline data around it, which I probably think is probably for the first time. So well done, mate. Are you happy with the outcome? You must be, because you're happy to come onto the show to tell me about it. So no doubt it's been positive for people that use buyer's agents.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the main thing is this is an industry first research that dives this deep into that understanding of why hundreds of Aussie investors are actually turning to buyer's agents to really start to make more confident, property decisions. Hence the name, Buying with Confidence, for this particular research report. I guess very happy with what we're seeing. And the beauty about this research isn't, call up a few InvestorKit clients who've done well and ask them for that. This is unbiased research, hence the partnership with Agile Market Intelligence to be able to go deep and say, let's pull out a survey to people from all walks of life and let's go in there and say, well, hey, there's a good mix of, different male investors, female investors, from those earning even under 45K of income to those earning well over the top brackets of over 180 and 200. People from all across Australia. We had, 44% New South Wales, which tends to be obviously the largest state and more people here. But then we were spread all across SA, WA, Queensland, even more. And there was a mix of people in terms of people who, were future property investors, hadn't actually invested yet, to those with 4+ property investors. And the statistics were great to firstly have that unbiased survey to be able to, I guess, be seeing what all walks of life start to think of the DIY, the full service, how would they go about it, and where would they start to feel like things are a positive difference or not. And I think one of the core stats that we took out was that 76% of first-time investors who actually used a full-service buyer's agent. By full service, we define this as those who can buy across the country and support them from starting brief identification and strategy all the way through to post-settlement. They said that they would use one again for their next property purchase. And I think that was a special statistic to see that, this industry is really making a positive difference to people. And it was great to be able to come to the forefront and do that research to say, hey, look, over three quarters technically are actually saying, not only do we make this decision and go down this pathway, but we actually feel compelled to do it all over again and be able to then do it all over again because we think we're going to naturally get that better result. So that was one of the core insights that we took out of this for sure. Yeah,
I'm quite comfortable around data and reports. Being a journo, I must get plenty of it every single day coming into my inbox. And I typically have a healthy skepticism for data and surveys and as an originator of reports that come out of these things. And I say skepticism because most people that take on a research project, that there is a level of bias, as in they either want to prove something or disprove something, right? And this is just, we all remember our year 10 science around, doing experiments to see what would happen, right? Like there's a bit of that sort of channel in with data. So I have a healthy skepticism, but it normally gets my attention. I look at it and I go, okay, what's all this about? Tell me about it. I want to know and I want to learn from it. And to my earlier point, how can I use that information, or how can I help disseminate that information as a journo for other people to use it for more informed decision making. Now, I'll read a little bit out, and this from your report. This is the demographics part of it, which is sort of makes up this type of stuff. It says the 2023 Buying with Confidence survey was conducted between the 15th of August and the 4th of September 2023. So it's pretty recent stuff. The survey encouraged property investors and general consumers across Australia to complete the questionnaire. So Agile Market Intelligence Consumer Panel were invited to complete an online survey via email invitation. This is like all very technical, but this is how it works. The survey received a usable sample of 741 responses, including 626 fully completed submissions, which is a lot, by the way. That's more than statistically relevant. And by statistically relevant, so what that means is once you get above sort of 300-ish responses, it doesn't really change that much moving forward, right? So this is like this sort of like a benchmark for this sort of stuff that says if you get that many, you know, your data's pretty good. So 626 is really good. A number of responses were unqualified due to incomplete responses, while others did not meet the survey criteria. Therefore, the margin of error for the results enclosed ranges between plus/minus 3.92%. This is an excellent level of accuracy for a study of this nature. So there's efficacy to the survey that you've done, Arjun, between InvestorKit and Agile Market Intelligence. That's a big tick there. So really, we can assume that the numbers come out of this is a really good insight into the perception of Australian investors or consumers around investing in property. Now, I've done my own research as part of this, and I called up the head of research at Agile Market Intelligence, and I said to him, what's all this report about? Tell me about it. Just give me the color around it, which isn't really inside of the report itself. And I had a good yarn with him about it, and he gave me some color into some of the questions I had, which may not really come in a report, but which I want to know and I need to know as someone who's going to be asking you about it. So let's get into some of that, Arjun. Let's share some of the numbers. We'll just go to a quick break, everyone. Welcome back. It's Phil Tarrant for Smart Property Investment, chatting with Arjun Paliwal at InvestorKit. He's the director over there, founder. He's also a regular guest on the Smart Property Investment Show. He's my phone a friend when I need to chat through anything data related. And when he does his own data and has good data or good work, good research work, I like to bring him and have a yarn about it. So Arjun, you use his top line stat of 76% of first-time investors who use the full service buyer's agent said they would use one again for the next property purchase. Now, that's not a bad number. And I'd like to know what the other 24% of people who won't want to use a buyer's agent again, what do you think that would be the case?
Yeah, I think sometimes I'll talk about one thing in property investing that's probably more in recent times come up to be more apparent: instant gratification. And I think what's happened now is that naturally when you go out there to do a purchase of any kind, and especially after you've seen some of the results that have happened during that COVID period, 2020, 21, and then 22 before the interest rate cycle, sentiment started shifting. And now obviously we're seeing a recovery again. But I feel there would have been some aspect to do with that, seeing that 1 year on, 6 months on, 9 months on, the growth hasn't happened as quickly in a certain area. And this is where with property investing, it's actually not constantly about buying in the best growing area every single time. Because I can give you an example of people who've got a portfolio a quarter of the size of mine, but pay 2 times as much land tax. Do you know what I mean? And so I think the key here is that there needs to be a holistic review of performance to each investor. And sometimes when you're in the barbecue chats post using a buyer's agent, perhaps you're not seeing the same performances maybe in another area, and you're thinking, well, why don't we go there? Well, does your portfolio need that? Would you be okay for the risk appetite for that? So I think some of these things of instant gratification can sometimes, actually come into the mind of someone post-reviewing their experience. But of course, there's also some others out there who maybe, just don't do the best job. And this happens in the industry, like any industry. You have good sales agents, you have maybe not so good sales agents. And unfortunately, sometimes the stories of the few can be the headlines of the many. So I think it can be a bit of both those things that we're noticing as well.
Yeah, I think that's pretty well observed, Arjun. But I reckon if you ask those same people potentially a year on, so what I'm saying here is that the 24% of people who use the buyer's agent the first time around that don't plan to use it again. If you ask them in a year's time, would they do the same? I reckon half of them are gone, no, I want to use a buyer's agent again. I talk about that anecdotally because I speak to people all the time and go, I use a buyer's agent. I'm going to try and do it myself this time. And I speak to them in a year's time and I go, I still can't find it anywhere. It's impossible. I'm not getting a good stock. It always goes for more than I need, et cetera, because there's a whole bunch of properties they're not getting access to, point number one. Point number two, the fatigue and the malaise starts to set in of having to spend all their time, energy and effort trying to do it themselves when they're not getting the results, and often they come back. The other side of that equation would be, to your point, they might not necessarily be happy with the buyer's agent that they use the first time around, so therefore it's shaping their opinion to all buyer's agents at that moment in time. But what I've seen happen before, and it happens a lot, is the buyer's agent they use the first time might not necessarily be the buyer's agent they choose for the second and the third and the fourth property. And you must see that with your client base where they've potentially bought with someone else. They want to use a buyer's agent, but not necessarily that buyer's agent, and they come over to InvestorKit. Do you see that a lot, Arjun?
Yeah, we do actually see that a lot. And some of the common themes that we see are waiting time around when working with someone else. Sometimes we also see what was a perceived data-driven approach wasn't as much of a data-driven approach as they thought it would be. And then some of those X factors they saw up front weren't the X factors that they felt they got. So I think these sorts of things, do come onto someone's mind quite often. What was interesting in that whole aspect of the purchase, then the next purchase after that, there was a particular question that said, hey, look, thinking about your next investment property, which approach will you use? And we talked to the DIY investors, we talked to those who use local buyers agents, and we also spoke to those who said, hey, look, what about the full service buyers agent, someone who helps from strategy, research, all the way to the end on a holistic and more national approach. And what was really interesting to see is that when you look at that DIY investor, they sometimes can be pretty stuck in their way. They're like, hey, look, once I've gone DIY, I really want to do it. And about 70% of them said, no, I want to do it again. But that 30% started saying, oh, that wasn't so easy. I gave it a go. And now I want to start to consider another buyer's agent. And then the same thing with the local buyer's agent, 38% of the local buyer's agents said, I would do it again. But what was interesting is that 34% of those who used a local buyer's agent said, you know what, I probably want to be more holistic on my next purchase and use a full service buyer's agent to be everywhere else. And what was quite surprising was that 28%, which is the bigger ones amongst buyer's agent, that when they used a local one for the first purchase or a purchase, they wanted to make the next purchase DIY. Whereas in comparison to a full service buyer's agent, these numbers were different. What I saw in the full service buyer's agent was someone used one for the first, 76% of them wanted to use a full service buyer's agent again. So they could clearly see that was the biggest number here. But then 9% said they would do it DIY and 15% said they would do it with the local BA. So big takeout for me there is that when someone uses a more localized buyer's agent in the survey, they do have a little bit more thinking about, what, could I have done it myself? Could I maybe, go and have a conversation with the next one now that I've got the backyard one out of the way to go and maybe spread my wings? Whereas when someone used a full service buyer's agent, they were thinking to themselves, okay, I'm in. I've got a strategy. I'm committed to them for the long term in terms of executing the strategy. I want to work with them again and keep thinking holistic, thinking broad with my research. And they were the lowest group of people that turned to DIY post using one, which clearly shows their attitudes that when you look after someone holistically for strategy, negotiation, planning a portfolio, they tend to get some momentum with you and want to start actually building out the portfolio rather than consider DIY. It's kind of one of those experiences where I've gone to the good side and I feel good about it, and I don't really want to come back to doing it myself or going specifically with an individual-based market buyer's agent.
That's pretty well observed, Arjun, and there's a lot to unpack there. Where I would start with it is most Australian property investors only buy between 1 and 2 properties, and they may fall into the cohort of people who are more DIY orientated. You're introducing new lexicon into this market that is a DIY investor, and it's nice to be able to frame things in a particular way, because if you can bundle them up or give them structure, then you can compare and contrast, right? Which is a big part of research. So you've got a DIY investor, that's someone who does the investing themselves, which is the way it's largely been done in Australia for decades, right? Like buyers agencies are a relatively new thing, right? So they do it themselves. They find the property, they negotiate the property, they instruct their team, conveyance, et cetera, to transact it, and then they settle on it, right? The DIY investor. You're interested in the new term of a local buyer's agent. Now, most localized buyer's agents I'm familiar with, often they're more sort of owner-occupier related rather than investor orientated, and that's another cohort there. Some buyer's agent will only buy within an area and say we're experts here, so use us to buy in this area. But then you've introduced this term of a full service buyer's agent, which you're saying there is no geographic bounds or barriers connected with these people. They're focused on a wealth creation journey for property investors who probably will go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to however many properties they're going to buy. There seems to be inherent attraction for those people who are looking to make it something a lot more than 1 or 2 properties to use a full service buyer's agent so they can drive it. I think your observation around using a local buyer's agents for that first purchase and then pivoting to do it yourself, for a lot of people, they might just need their hand held that first time because of uncertainty or it's a new experience and they've never done it before. But when they go through that process, and maybe their experience with the local buyer's agent was underwhelming compared to what they wanted, and you said maybe it wasn't as data-driven, or they felt as, okay, here's a property, here you go. They've gone, I could probably do that myself because I'm only going to do 1 more property. Maybe that is part of that point there.
I think that learning piece you mentioned is a critical part. To give credit to the local buyer's agent, they would have learned a lot in that experience, been so hands-on in that local experience, and then they want to give it a go and start to broaden their horizon. Or even like you pointed out, like if you have maybe a backyard purchase first, many people like on the first purchase want to have a bit more comfort. So they still want that hybrid experience of in my backyard and specialized. Wow, I felt good in that process. That helped me a lot. Now do I go DIY a bit more and start to spread my wings? There could have been some interesting reasons underpinning like the actual core decision-making they had.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I have no bias anywhere, whether if people want to be a DIY, well, I think people should use professionals in property investment personally, but if you want to do it yourself, use someone who's specialized on a particular area. And if you're going to go down that pathway of using a buyer's agent who specializes in a particular area, you've got to get to the point of identifying that you want to invest in there. So you've got to do a lot more of the prelim work to work out that's where I want to go. And there I'll find a buyer's agent who operates in that area versus a full service buyer's agent. Have no bias at all. We're just dealing with the numbers. Now, one of the headline numbers which really stood out for me, and that's just this 62% of DIY investors said they did not use a buyer's agent for their most recent property purchase. So it's a bit of a oxymoron that, because I read that number as 62% of people didn't use a buyer's agent. They didn't use a buyer's agent for their most recent purchase. That means 38% of people did use a buyer's agent for their most recent purchase. And I sit there and just go, buyer's agents, my belief, don't yet have a market share of 38% of all property transactions. I reckon that, I don't know. Well, what do you think that number is? Market share of buyer's agent, Arjun? I've been trying to map it for years, and I think it's a lot more than what it was before we started talking about buyer's agents. But where do you think that number lies?
Look, I mean, this is a big estimate because it's not as cleanly collated on a national level. But as you know, we at Investikit won Australia's Buyers Agency of the Year for 2023, and we're a pretty sizable organization. And for us, we, would do sort of between sort of 35 to 50 transactions in a month, depending on the month, seasonalities, and so forth. And so from that perspective, you might think, hey, 500, 600, 400 seems like a decent number. But remember, in the biggest years, there's about 700,000 transactions in the year in Australia. And then in more of the average or smaller years, there's 450 to 550K. So I would say that the actual transactions through a buyer's agent may be below 5% or 10% in the nation. I don't think it's at that 38% mark, but I do feel that, if some of the larger buyer's agents, maybe even the top 10 or 20, put their deal making together, you're probably just in the early thousands of how many deals are actually happening for their clients. So I don't think it's that large of a percentage share. I do feel that obviously it's a growing percentage share, but I think it's still very small. And there is a more growth ahead expected, but B, it's also still relatively new in the marketplace, because whilst it's been around in smaller numbers of operators for the last maybe 10, 15, 20 years, potentially even longer. But in actual usage perspective, it still remains a fairly small percentage based on what we know. If you added, say, the top 20, 30, 40, 50 names together, you'd still be below 10,000 transactions or close to it. So I think that's my thoughts in terms of total numbers.
Yeah, I sort of agree with you on that. And I've been trying to work it out. And one day I'll work out how to do it. And I'll be able to provide a benchmark of buyers agents market share. All I know is that, to your point, it's a growing sector. It's a growing cadre of property investors who are using the skills and capabilities of buyers agent. We're local buyers agent, full service buyers agent. So with a research sort of hat on, I would say more. I think you've probably got more of a sophisticated investor audience have completed this survey than sort of wider property investors or property purchasers, purely on the basis that 38% of people, the inverse of that 62% is that they will be using a buyer's agent for the next purchase. That's huge. But if you consider that within the context of this podcast, people tuning into this already have a huge head start in their level of sophistication when it comes to investing in property because they're investing in their education, much like people who tune into your podcast, Sergeant Property Nerds, right? Like they're already streets ahead in terms of their level of sophistication through expansive nature of their education through tuning in. You're probably going to get more people using a buyer's agent on that basis. So the number is good. Like, if buyer's agents got a 38% market share of the Australian property market, that's a huge industry, mate. It is a monster of an industry. That Absolutely. Said, though, when I started working in and around mortgages, mortgage brokers had a market share of 16%. That's 16%. It's now 70%. 20 years on. So it goes to show what can happen when new opportunities, which are valuable to consumers and provide value to the property buying process, come into play. Who would have thought that mortgage brokers write 70% of all new home loans? So there's a bright future for buyers agents, to the point that you created this Buying with Confidence survey, which turned into the Buying with Confidence report for 2023. This is something which I think can help map moving forward the direction of the buyer's agent sector in Australia. Now, there's a really good stat here, Arjun. 26% of investors said they did not use a full service buyer's agent for their most recent property purchase. So that's sort of connected with that number around the 62%. 19%, Arjun, of potential investors said they would use a full service buyer's agent from beginning to end. Tell me about that from beginning to end. So it means that they're getting the whole process supported by a full service buyer's agent, which would be an assessment, a strategy, all the way through to portfolio creation, assessment, and balancing, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that end-to-end experience. And I guess we unpacked that data point a little bit more for those who wanted to actually use one. And we dug into some of the questions to be able to understand what was some of the X factors, like what were their reasons for using, say, a certain buyer's agent? And when we start to look at the purchases that they made, what were some of the things that were standing out? And this interestingly showed where I think, as you pointed out with the industry trend and the growth ahead, where some X factors will lie. When we asked the property investors saying, hey, what was the nature of this next property or the property that you purchased, sorry? And that was divided into two buckets, on-market and off-market purchases. And this was to understand if they'd been able to find, I guess, the investment property without the help of your buyer's agent, considering full service and local. And 38% said, yeah, look, I might have been able to get it. Maybe it was an online listing or in an area, or they had some sort of confidence there. But a whopping 62% said, no, I don't think I'd be able to find that investment property I purchased without the help of my buyer's agent. So we try to unpack this a little bit more in the world of off-market and on-market. And this is where some X factors start to show and why people are starting to consider more full-service buyer's agent. DIY investors had about 84% of their purchases purchased online on the internet. And hats off to those DIY investors that worked through, got some phone calls, emails, visits to real estate offices in, because they had 16% purchase off market, which is great for the DIYs out there to get that 16% off market. But the full service buyer's agent had about 59% of their purchases off market. So those who use that full service buyer's agent, we're definitely starting to notice that X factor of purchasing property that's not on the internet. And so I think these are coming back to your point, Phil, of the trends, and coming back to those who are saying, look, I would consider using a full-time, full-service buyer's agent. not only is that strategy and the planning being considered, but also stock unlocking and unlocking more off markets was clearly evident when you surveyed the DIY purchases. Even the local BAs were in the middle at 28%. It was the full services who were building larger teams, getting to access markets across the nation, building relationships. They were being able to put a position for their clients to say, hey, look, we're going to start to actually get you more of those off markets. And I think the final thing to add there is we're trying to add, well, that's just one piece of the full service. Why are now people more starting to consider it? Well, we had a question, and with this question, we looked at the difficulty of finding property. And we found that stress levels are significantly lower for full service buyer's agent supported clients. And when we looked at the purchasing process and making that easy, it was very unsurprising that, investors using a full service buyer's agent are actually almost 1.5 times more likely to find the process of purchasing property easy compared to DIY investors. About 11% of DIY investors rated their property purchasing experience as pretty difficult. Whereas in regards to the full service buyer's agent, this was the lowest at about 8%. So the numbers get lower. And then when you start to look at the easy, the top ranking, which was, hey, this is the easiest I've ever felt. For DIY investors, this was about a 49% saying it was really, really easy. But for full service investors, in terms of the buyer's agency, it was 68%. So these are two big standouts, Phil, that people just really noticed that the property actually buying process was very low stress and lower stress and easier with a full service buyer's agent, combined with they were just getting access to more stock off market, which are reasons why we're now starting to see that consideration of the full service increase.
Yeah, two key parts there, Arjun. One is the assets that you get access to, and the other side of it is the ease of the purchase with a view towards the stress. Now, stress is a product of time, bandwidth, education, mindset. And I would argue that using a buyer's agent, you essentially detach yourself from a lot of those elements, which typically for people who are not familiar with or experienced around property are stressful. They take the brunt. They run point for you. They're the buffer between yourself and the purchase. And if you're buying for the purpose of purchase of property and investing, you should not be emotionally connected with the property. What you should be emotionally connected is with the outcome. Now, a full service buyer's agent will support you on running point through that whole process, from what are you doing and what your goals are through to where are you buying and what are you buying and then buying. And for a lot of people, minimizing a lot of that uncertainty by giving you confidence and a trusted friend working for you can mean that process is a lot less stressful and therefore a lot more enjoyable. The same thing connected in with that is time constraints for people and why they would be using a full service buyer's agent, which is what I use. I just, it's not the best place for me to invest my time when there's someone else that can do it better than I can and they can get a better outcome, and it allows me to concentrate on things that I'm good at, like recording podcasts. So that's one side of the equation. The other side is a really important one, is access to properties, Arjun. And the fact that some, and I'd like to look into that some DIY investors are getting off-market stuff themselves. Like, that requires a lot of work. And I know that real estate agents, depending on the market environment, they really like working with buyer's agents because typically they've got clients who are ready to buy, they're pre-approved, and it's just the basis of getting the deal done versus working with people who are sort of self-directed or DIY, who might not have the experience and therefore might not be pre-approved and therefore might waste more time. So they like to work with buyer's agent. But you use a couple of different terms there. You used, and it's good to clear this up. You have off-market, and then I would say you have pre-market or pre-platform, and then you got on-market. So off-market is purely off-market. It's where a buyer's agent or yourself will be securing properties that is often direct with the owner in some capacity, and it happens in 100 different ways. It could be door knocking, it could be whatever, right? Then you got pre-platform, and this is where a real estate agent might have access to a property, and they will sell it before it even lands on your realestate.com.au. And then you've got stuff which is on the internet, which is where most DIY investors typically operate because they're not able to dig down or don't have access into those other properties. How much of your value proposition, Arjun, would you say is access to properties that other people don't normally get access to, and or removing a lot of that stress and being an enabler on the actual buying side of things? Is the real strength the asset capabilities and asset acquisition of a buyer's agent that DIY investors don't really normally get?
Yeah, it's a big X factor for us. It's a big proposition. Like, I've just got some of our internal data here. We're looking at the months from July till November, which is just this financial year for context. The month of July, we had 54% purchases off market. The month of August, 59%. September, 55%. October, 64%. And November, 62%. And this is a combination of pre and off that were not going through all the way and not even on the internet. We'd purchased them before they hit the internet.
Yep.
I think that's the first part. It's the clear ability to make relationships at scale. And I compare this to like just someone maybe pulling out the applications, the emails, the phone calls on their lunch break, mornings, evenings, weekends, versus a dedicated acquisition specialist team that calls 500 plus connects, not dials, connects, meaning you could dial 1,000, 2,000, don't care. We need to hit 500 every week of pure connects and be able to make sure we're reaching out to that database, people that we've worked before, people that we haven't worked before, field trips on the ground, and also emails, text messages, WhatsApp groups, whatever it takes to be able to source these percentages. That's the first thing. The second thing is that missing out on property is normal. But missing out forever and thinking the whole world's against you, the market's against you. Oh, look, it's too overpriced. I don't want to buy. It's too expensive. Could you imagine if you asked that question to everyone 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, who kept saying, no, it's too expensive? And so where I think another art that's often missed that buyer's agents try and perfect, those that can do this well, are being able to accurately price something in the sweet spot. And by sweet spot, I mean, don't want to keep missing out. Don't want to overpay. And so we look at things like offer to purchase ratios, and we deem that to find the sweet spot, we don't want to be winning more than 55% of deals. If we're winning more than 55% of deals, we're going to take a step back and go, hold on a minute, pricing, negotiation. Are we as ruthless as we could be? Are we analyzing as nicely and correctly as we could be, or are we analyzing too bullishly? And then usually at 38%, we found the metrics is where we're looking down and we're missing the analysis. We're like, didn't consider how nice that kitchen is, didn't consider maybe how nice the backyard shape is, more flatland versus, up on the hill. Like all these little things that we could have maybe better considered to improve the pricing. So how many people are sitting there in their lounge or in their computer over the weekend perfecting their offer to purchase ratios, offline purchase percentages, speed to buy, relationships, and then also being able to get their market research encompassing and surrounding all of this to be in the right areas at the right time. And so this is some of those core propositions that you talk about that the full service buyers agency that we have is trying to really make sure we have. And we kind of compare it to like that private bank offering where we say, hey, we've got a 5-to-1 ratio, research team, onboarding team, acquisitions team, strategy team, buyers agents. And so this way you can have specialists in each area. So I think the main thing there, Phil, is yes, it's becoming a core proposition, and it is a core proposition for us. And that extra stock sourcing is one element, making it easy as an element. And it comes as a result of all of these pieces really coming together.
Well, there's a stat here that echoes all those sentiments, Arjun. That is 64% of investors who have or will use a buyer's agent said it's to ensure they make the right investment decision. It's pretty clear, right? People want to make sure that out of all that sort of stuff, that's a right asset, right place, right time is absolutely critical. And I know most property investors, once they get one, they go, well, okay, what's next? So you've got to be thinking of buying today with the future in mind. There's one more stat here I want to sort of work through, Arjun. We'll just go to another break. Stay with us. Back in a moment. Welcome back. Phil Tarrant from Smart Property Investment with Arjun Paliwal from InvestorKit. We're chatting through the 2023 Buying with Confidence Reward, which obviously we're singing the praises of buyers agents here, and there's nothing new there. And I see a lot of growth for this sector because it's growing from such a low base, to be fair. So I would expect growth of people using buyers agents as more people take control and realize, property as a vehicle for wealth creation is a relatively safe bet in Australia versus some of the other asset classes out there. You know, that's why Australians love property so much, because if you do the basics right and the fundamentals right, you can typically, unless there's seismic shifts and changes to the economy, which the government will probably hopefully ensure doesn't sort of change the value of real estate in Australia, it's not a bad place to create wealth. So buyer's agents will continue, growth of buyer's agent sector will continue. And there's an interesting stat here, Arjun, from the 2023 Buying with Confidence report, which you can download on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. You just go to the website, you'll see pretty easily where you can find it and download it. And there's lots of commentary in there as well. 14% of DIY first-time investors said they would use a buyer's agent for the next property purchase. So first-time investors who went alone, 14% of them are going, I'm going to use a buyer's agent next time. That's not bad. That's not bad. They're realizing they probably need a buyer's agent on side to help drive and give them that portfolio growth. How many first-time sort of investors come in to InvestorKit who did it themselves the first time and they've gone, no, I need some help the next time around?
Yeah, that's a huge number. I was talking to the team actually about something I hate doing and unfortunately have to do, and it's the right thing to do, but I hate playing fixer-upper. I just wish how many people would have been able to go, come to you guys the first time. And the most common one, Phil, is I live in Sydney or Melbourne or Brisbane. These are the three most common. And actually by population size, they come up. I live in Sydney, Melbourne or Brisbane. I'm a local to those areas. I decided to buy a first investment property off the guidance of my family. They knew a mate, knew someone who was selling these new units, and I went and bought a unit between 2016 to 2018. Crazy how that in our deep dive of client base was the most common story. So I learned a few things. Firstly, meaningful in the right way, like as in people who mean well with their advice, don't always end up turning to good decisions just because someone means well. And these are close family, like family saying, hey, property has served us well, even though it might just be sitting in the family home, but we want you to be in it and we want to support you to get in it, or you're going to follow the steps of what you saw them do. They didn't tell you. Meaningful advice that means well advice, and you're trying to make that decision, and then you end up buying the unit. And then the second thing I noticed is that you actually have a lag of impact. So what I'm talking about stats now, so stats for 5 years, but I'm talking about purchases that were commonly made in 2016 to 18, which shows that people still live on to these stings for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, because both 5 years of the last years of sort of unit price growth and even 7 years haven't been great at all in markets like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. And so what that shows clearly is that when you make a wrong first decision, unfortunately, we have to make that fixer-upper and really make sure it goes right. But then the second thing here is that you actually end up delaying your scaling of a portfolio substantially in reaching your goals, and you end up having to really rush around to find that next advisor that helps, because 5 years is no short time of investing, Phil. Imagine how many decisions someone could have positively made for themselves over the last 5 years and what that would have equaled out to for their portfolio. But this is a huge common thing we see. So I think, firstly, the unit thing was clear. The advice from family was clear. Buying in backyard was another thing that was clear. And then how long they delayed their decision to the next one, because there's fear built in, there's mistakes to avoid again, and there's no actual meaningful growth. So they had to really grind the hard way, having a negative cash flow property with rising mortgage rates, with no equity growth, and then trying to save in between to come back to us for their second. So it's a very, very common scenario. And it actually leads to a stat that's quite important in this report, which was investors with expert advice use more measures to clearly evaluate their property performance, which is really interesting. We looked at DIY investors, Phil, and about 51% of them started looking at capital growth in comparison to national averages and looking at data for growth in detail. Whereas for people who used the buyer's agent, it was 71%. So I think on that note of those stories of playing fixer-upper, you're straight away seeing that once you make a decision, sometimes you can be like, oh, I did that. My own internal bias kicks in. I made a decent decision. I don't need to really evaluate it much. It's my decision. I don't regret anything in life. I'm happy with me. But then those who are using professionals are sitting there and going, hey, can I evaluate this? Can you teach me how to evaluate this? Can I sit here and go, I want to learn how to make better decisions. Can we make the next one even better? And so there's this constant self-improvement, and also why those who use the professional start to move to the second, third, and fourth in quicker succession, because they're in an environment of evaluation. It's like the person in sports who throws a ball, shoots a hoop, kicks a ball, and evaluates, tries to get training and then gets better, versus the person who just keeps kicking it the same way every single time.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a big cohort of your client origination is solving problems. We've all probably heard that business analogy where you've got two barbers on one street. One's really busy, one's empty. One says $5 haircuts. The other one says we fix $5 haircuts. And that's a lot busier than the $5 haircut place. It's irrelevant how much they pay. It's the fact that they fix $5 haircuts. So, very much similar to buyer's agents where, and I hear it a lot, they're unraveling poor decisions and people, they get fatigued. Like a lot of people, they go, I want to invest in property. It's a great asset class. That's great. Then they go and do what you've spoken about and they have a really underwhelming experience as a result of it. And then they're off property completely. You hear it all the time. And often it's because they've bought, and it's not a beat up on off the plan apartments, but an off the plan apartment somewhere in an area where there is literally about 4,000 other off the plan apartments getting built over the next sort of 10 years. They overpay on the way in, and the value of the property never goes up because they're just making more of them. And there's always something newer than what there is because there's more stuff getting built. I know a lot of people, and probably you know them as well, Arjun, who have timed those sort of purchases really well, where they've bought at a particular level off the plan and they've sold it at settlement on completion for a lot more, but that's normally the exception. How hard is it for people to take a big haircut where they just go, I know property's right, I've got the wrong property, I need you to fix this for me, Arjun? Does it necessarily always mean you're losing money? Or is it about sort of the missed opportunity cost largely?
Yeah, it's a large part of opportunity cost. I think property is a forgiving asset class where people, even though they, maybe lost money at some point, they haven't lost too much in Australia, even in some of those lower priced units or more the entry level units where people have made some mistakes on. What I would say is that its opportunity cost is the biggest problem. And when people do reach out to us when we're going through that opportunity cost, one thing I do say on the positive note, I know you don't want to make a mistake to then look for the positive only in it all the time, but I guess the positive that's coming out of those who made those mistakes and then start to come to professionals for guidance is that they come in with a real sense of motivation now. Like it's not just, oh, I'm ready to invest because I earn a bit of money, I saved a bit of money and I'm doing okay. They come in with this, no, I'm fully committed. I want to do what they say. I want to do where they say. I want to give this a go. I want to sit back because I don't want to burn my hands again. I don't want to make the mistake of doing what I did prior. So I guess sometimes there's that positive of making a mistake where you come in and go, let's do this together. Let's get this right. I just don't like doing it because I'm like, oh man, I wish you'd come to us first. But it is what it is.
Well, there's lots of education out there now, mate. Some people don't do that, but
absolutely.
I think that that's a great enabler of taking action is, people who feel as though I've invested in property because I was told it was the right thing to do, or my accountant told me to buy this property because it was really good for minimizing tax, or whatever the reason was, whatever. But if you waste a decade in property, you've wasted a lot of time. So if you've made the wrong decision, you need to work quickly to realize that you made the wrong decision and do something about it, which sometimes means taking a bit of a haircut or not realizing what you thought, but it gives you an opportunity to start again and realign and recalibrate and do the right thing. So, if you feel as though you've made the wrong decision in your first investment property, speak to someone about it. I'm sure Arjun and his crew over in Investigate would be happy to discuss it. Arjun, I really like this report. I like chatting through data and giving some, hey, here's the numbers, but what does it actually mean? This is the interpretation bit of research, isn't it?
That's the key, right? It's all that interpretation of that research that we've done and the numbers that actually have a bit of commentary in this report to be able to back up what's happening and what's being said. So I'd encourage people to check it out, and it's obviously totally free off the back of this research.
Go and check it out. smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Arjun has made it available for everyone to download there in conjunction with Agile Market Intelligence. Any questions, you can email our team, editor@smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. But I'm sure, Arjun, people want to stress test anything or ask you about this, what's the best way to get in touch with your crew, mate?
Yeah, so if people have looked at this research and they've said, hey, I can really see the value here of not only learning more about full service buyers agencies, but being able to start to use them to better my portfolio, it's investorkit.com.au, and you can reach out for a free initial discovery call.
All right, go and check it out. Arjun, thanks for your time. I always enjoy the insights, and we'll see you back on the show soon, mate.
See you soon, my friend. Take care.
Nice one. That's Arjun Paliwal, director over at InvestorKit. Go and check those guys out. Remember to check out smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. It's where you can download the report. You'll also see on social media. Smart Property HQ is where you'll find us. We'll see you next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.
Do you need help planning your next event? With over 15 years of experience, Captivate Events is the expert in event planning. Our dedicated team ensures every detail is meticulously handled. Whether it's a gala dinner, exhibition, conference, or study tour, we've got you covered. We'll be there every step of the way, from conceptualisation to flawless execution, to ensure your event is a seamless experience, minimising the time and stress involved in planning. Make your next event one to remember. Visit www.captivateevents.com.au or call 02 8866 2440 and find out how we can captivate your audience.